In this week's anime, we follow the story of a boy whose greatest wish is to become ever stronger and exceed human limits. He puts his training into practice beating up bikers' gangs, but one day he gets hit by a truck, which propels him into a world where magic grants him the power he always sought. In a riverside home, an alarm announces the beginning of Nishino Akane's day. Her room highlights her achievements, with many trophies filling the glass cases. She's trying to grasp how she fell asleep, but the book next to her in the bed solves the mystery. She was reading Find Darwin, Volume 3. Before leaving the house, she takes a shower, hot water throbbing her face and body. She watches her reflection in the bathroom mirror. As a drop of water trickles down her chin, we see her unsmiling mouth. Then she dresses up, puts on her clothes, and has a moment of hesitation before pressing the handle. As she opens the door, a flashback floods her mind. The memory of frenzied paparazzi, thrusting microphones and blinding cameras in her face. Her personal chauffeur, who was waiting in front of the house, saw her reaction and anxiously called her name. She reassures him and climbs into the car. As they leave the driveway, we see another car lurking nearby. Soon, Akane arrives at school and steps out of the car smiling. Her schoolmates greet her enthusiastically. She responds to everyone politely. She reaches the school entrance, where a boy is opening his shoe locker. Akane confesses she doesn't like this boy, a Kajnu Kun, but still, she makes an effort to greet him, just as she does with everyone else. We learn it's his mediocrity that annoys Akane. His grades, his athletic skills, and his looks are all unremarkable. On top of that, he always gets her name wrong. First he calls her Nishimara, then apologizes for not remembering her name. He had memorized the names of every key figure in their class, but since he's not getting enough sleep lately, he failed to remember her name. Akane's internal dialogue shows her annoyance. They've been in the same class and sitting next to each other for 3 months, but he still can't get her name. But out loud, she only says the right thing. She admits that everyone makes mistakes, so it's no big deal. Though Kajnu apologizes, he gets her name wrong again, calling her Nishitani-san. With a forced smile, she corrects him, emphasizing that her name is Akane Nishino. The bell rings, so they have to rush to class. Kajnu excuses himself, but mistakes Akane's name again. Akane intently watches Kajnu going up the flight of stairs, and her smile fades. She reveals the ultimate reason why she doesn't like Kajnu. He doesn't look at her, but beyond her, at something else. The scene cuts to a classroom where Akane is surrounded by her colleagues, who congratulate her on her progress in her acting career. Until now, she did her best to ignore Kajnu and not get involved with him, but she tried not to do it in a flagrant way. Kajnu, who sits just next to Akane, is lost in his thoughts, counting onwards from 20,553. During a break at school, Akane goes to the bathroom, where she recalls the incident that made her pause her acting career in middle school. In the mirror, she sees her young self, all frightened. Back then, the papers featured the scandal as the horror of the stalker. Ever since that incident, Akane started wearing a mask in public. The scene transitions to a school rooftop, where Kajnu is engrossed in a book about the limits of living creatures. The book features symbols and German inscriptions, and he reads through the pages. He expresses a wish to have more power. In the afternoon, during a classroom meeting, Akane volunteers to take responsibility for the aggregation of school festival questionnaires. But she already has her schedule full of supplementary lessons, so the aggregation is instructed to Kajnu. To be favored by teachers and classmates, Akane had made great efforts to become a popular honor student. She tunes her ears to a piano song pouring through the window from another classroom, where Kajnu plays the piano as if in a trance. The sun goes down, and students gradually leave the school grounds. When she finishes her lesson, Akane calls her driver, but he doesn't pick up. His phone rings in the car as he gets beat up by a gangster. Since he doesn't pick up, Akane decides to walk home. From the rooftop, Kajnu sees her leave school by herself. It's the first time Akane walked home alone since the incident. She hears a noise and turns her head abruptly. Initially, it seemed no one was there. Akane breathes a sigh of relief and wants to see her way, but bumps into a massive man who suddenly appears behind her. He asks her if she's Akane Nishino, and she runs away frightened, asking why. She can't believe this kind of thing is happening to her again. A car appears and blocks Akane's way. The man who beat up her driver jumps from the car. The two men catch Akane, and she struggles to set herself free, but to no avail. The blonde kidnapper covers her mouth and nose with a handkerchief, soaked in a sleep-inducing drug. The drug quickly kicks in, and her eyes close. She catches sight of Kajnu, holding a bag and looking directly at her. The two men carry Akane to the car. After a while, Akane wakes up in an abandoned warehouse, bound and gagged, staring through the ceiling window at the crescent moon. The kidnappers are right there, the blonde one telling Akane it wasn't a smart idea to go out alone at night, given she's a young lady of the Nishino conglomerate. The other man tells Akane that they sent a ransom note, so as soon as they receive the money, she'll be free. The kidnappers start arguing because the blonde one is aggressive, being one of Akane's father's enemies. Akane watches them quarrel, with tears in her eyes. Meanwhile, Kajnu uses his phone to reflect what's happening in the warehouse and sees the kidnappers. He drops his wrist weights and opens his bag, revealing a mask and two crowbars. The blonde gangster approaches Akane. He wants her to cheer him up as a fan service, but Akane resists, and the man slaps her. He teases Akane that she's got used to it because it's the second time that she's been kidnapped. This triggers a memory in Akane, a disturbing incident when a stalker had amazed a collection of photos of her, tied her to a bed, and attempted to sexually abuse her. In the meantime, Kajnu climbs down from the roof of the warehouse. The gangster unbuttons his belt, unbuttons Akane's shirt, and prepares to rape her. But a shadow appears on the ceiling window just in time. Akane watches with wide eyes as the man smashes through a window and lands in the warehouse. Introducing himself as the stylish thug Slayer, the gangster is alarmed and prepares to shoot with his gun, but the stylish thug Slayer throws a shard of glass and penetrates his hand. Then he throws the gangster to the back and stomps him in the face with his boot. Blood spurts everywhere. At this moment, the other kidnapper intervenes, impressed by the Slayer's skills. The kidnapper drops his arm and reveals that he's a former soldier who was expelled from the army, which forced him to team up with the nasty hooligans. Akane stands in shock, watching the two men, the kidnapper and the Slayer. The ex-soldier draws a knife and attempts to stab the Slayer, but only manages to graze his shoulders. Recollections of his time in the army, the thrill of taking lives, flood back, and he makes another attempt to stab the Slayer. However, this time the Slayer deflects his attack with a crowbar. Now the advantage drifts to the Slayer, given the crowbar is hard to break and easy to carry. The two engage in a fierce battle, and the Slayer wields two crowbars like Tonfa, intimidating the ex-soldier. The soldier admits the Slayer's fighting aptitudes. He drops the knife and relies on his fists, hoping that the sheer difference from their physiques will make him win the combat. But the Slayer only now unleashes his true power. He hits the soldier with the crowbar, destroying his wrist. Every night, the Slayer beat up gangsters in silence. Upon hearing this, the soldier is horrified, realizing that this guy is the ski mask berserker who wallowed the biker gangs with one bar. Because the gangsters started wearing helmets to protect their heads, the Slayer concluded that crowbars are better with simple strikes, rather than as a tonfa. He approaches the soldier, who desperately tries to get a hold of his gun on the ground. But it's too late. The Slayer strikes his hand, and his leg, and then finally, he hits his neck with the L part of the bar, putting him to the ground. With his remaining strength, the soldier begs the Slayer to wait, but to no avail. The Slayer strikes him repeatedly until he lies dead in a pool of blood. Then he approaches Akane with a knife, and she believes he's coming to kill her too. Actually, the Slayer frees her and tells her to be more careful when walking home next time. Then, he vanishes without a trace. The dead kidnappers are tied to a pole, and their guns are disassembled. Up on the roof, the Slayer takes off his mask and sighs over his performance against the ex-soldier because it cannot match that of the eminence in shadow. After that, Akane calls the police, and her father takes measures to conceal the case from the public. In her parents' embrace, she thinks about the identity of the Slayer who saved her. The next day at school, her classmates greet her as normal. She enters the school and greets Kajnu-kun. For the first time, he gets her name right, and he's really looking at her. This leaves Akane to believe that they are both alike, both leading a masked life. The scene shifts to the following morning at Akane's house, where a news report discusses an incident that occurred in Sakurasaka City. A high school student named Minoru Kajnu was run over by a truck and died. Then we see a very young Kajnu looking at a series of screens in which strong characters, heroes, and villains unfold. From that young age, he aspired to be one of the strongest characters, but it wasn't just a whim for him. As he grew up, his aspirations stayed with him to become ever greater. He took lessons in karate, boxing, fencing, and fighting, just so he could pursue his dream of becoming stronger. Despite his deep aspiration, at school, he acts like a mediocre person, never standing out. The people around him all abandoned their hero dreams when they grew up, but Kajnu maintained his goals. However, he realizes that despite all his efforts to learn battle skills, he still can't get an overwhelming power. But he can put down hooligans. If he were surrounded by armed soldiers, he would be done. Or if a nuclear bomb was dropped, no matter how well trained he is, he would be vaporized. But that's what it's called to be human, and that's why he wants to exceed human limits. Suddenly, we see Kajnu dressed in a hooded dark robe, saying that no compromise is allowed. Then we get a shot of a city, in which the tower stands out. On the streets, there are tramways, horse-driven carts, and people buying from the market. Buying Kajnu, a team of 7 women appear and ensure him that everything's going according to plan. They appreciate Kajnu's judgment, who is their master, and are excited for tonight's hunt. Then we see other female groups spread across the city, waiting to receive orders from the master. Kajnu looks down upon the sparkling city and says that this is the long-awaited reincarnation. He stretches his hand and a magic fire appears. With magic fire as an instrument, he is unstoppable. At his orders, everyone dives from the skyscraper into the darkness of the night. Kajnu is ready to disregard everything just so he can achieve his goal. He doesn't wish to be a hero or a villain. With his 2 weapons, a crowbar and a sword, he can finally be the eminence in shadow. If you enjoyed this series, let me know in the comments below. You should also check out last week's featured anime, Berserk of Gluttony, in which a starving boy awakens the strongest skill of all. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.